Chapter 16. Lucas. She finally had a name. Katie did. A smile grew on my face as I stared at my phone, starting from someplace so deep inside, I'd forgotten it even existed. It wasn't much, and it wasn't as good as knowing her real name, but it was something. I had one more point of information to flesh out the picture I had of her in my head. A little girl with long legs and a song to hum, and a nickname, Katie did. When she called me out on living in my mom's basement, I laughed. Her joke hit a little closer to the truth than I was ready to let on. After all, I was living in my mother's house, though the circumstances were different than what I'm sure she had in mind. But so were most of my siblings, which, now that I thought about it, maybe made it worse, even though we weren't freeloading. Our story was one of those things you couldn't explain well over text, so I let it be. Maybe one day, when we were face to face, I'd be able to tell her everything. Explaining my nickname would be difficult. I didn't talk about what happened to me in Afghanistan. The little bit of heroism that had my squad mates calling me Skywalker, a play on my first name, and a reference to the fact that I was willing to sacrifice my life for the life of my commanding officer. My family knew the details of that day, as did my doctors and physical therapists. The people who were there with me knew, of course, hence the nickname. But now that there wasn't a good reason for the story to be told, I kept my mouth shut on the topic. I had no desire to live through it again, especially in front of anyone who might read the emotion that still strangled me. Better to leave that shit in the past. That was the beauty of emailing with Katie did. I smiled as I used her name. The anonymity allowed me to talk about things that I wouldn't dare discuss with anyone else. My revelations after waking up in the hospital, the feeling of being the only person in the world with my eyes open. How could I say that to anyone and not have it seem like a slap in the face? Hey there, little brother. Thanks for everything you've done for me. Oh, by the way, have I mentioned that I think you're doing it all wrong? That you've got life backwards? By the way, thanks for all the moral support you've given me since the accident. Yeah, that just wouldn't have gone over well. Sharing those thoughts with Katie did was easy. It felt like freedom. And reading her thoughts in return, that was pure bliss. It was too early to tell yet, but I thought I had finally found someone else with her eyes open. We both looked at the world in a way that no one else around us did. Maybe that was why we clicked, even when we had never technically met. I wondered if she went back to the coffee shop and stared at the men as they walked in, hoping to discover which one was me. If I was still in Galveston, I'd be in that damn place every day, waiting for her. And maybe that's why when Wyatt offered to do the new hire meeting with Kat, I was almost relieved to let him have it. The physical attraction between us was palpable, but my mind belonged to a woman in Texas. Her words had wormed their way into my heart. Maybe, after everything was settled here at the hut, I'd return to Galveston and meet her face to face. Today, Kat was moving into the room next to mine. And for as often as I reminded myself that Katie did was here first, my body was quick to remind me that Kat was here now. And so, I waited on the front porch for her to arrive while mentally composing my response to Katie did. The roar of the ocean kept me company, and I rubbed at a sore spot in my thigh, cursing under my breath at the pain. The week had been stressful. Digging through Dad's financial records, Wyatt and I found mistake upon mistake upon mistake. And for reasons I can't quite understand, each new inconsistency we uncovered made Wyatt exponentially more unsettled. When we weren't working on that, I was either obsessing over Kat's arrival or staying up too late rereading random emails from Katie did. trying to glean as much information as I could. When I woke this morning, I needed to clear my head and took it out on my body, pushing too hard on my run. My leg gave out within minutes of getting started, but I had too much energy to burn, so I pushed past the first warning sign, and the second, and the third. I only stopped when I realized I couldn't not limp, and I paid for it all day. I would pay for it tomorrow, too. A red Jeep, sans roof, crawled up the driveway, and I stood, shielding my eyes against the sun. Kat's red hair flowed in the wind. A smile graced her face, and I swore I heard strains of her massacring Taylor Swift before she caught me watching and turned off the radio. I limped down the steps as she pulled to a stop. "Hey there," I said, squinting up at her, smooth as ever. She smiled as she brushed her hair back off her face. "Hey." She closed her eyes and tilted her face to the sky. I stared at her profile, the light smattering of freckles across her nose, the full lips, her cheeks pink from the sun. She took a deep breath, which pressed her breasts against the thin fabric of her shirt. I yanked my gaze away just as she opened her eyes. "It's a gorgeous day, isn't it?" I raised an eyebrow. "You realize the humidity's off the charts, right?" "True, but the breeze feels amazing." She grinned, and I realized Kat must be an optimist if she could find something good in a day with 90% humidity. She would fit in with Wyatt and Mom just fine. "I thought you might need help with your things," I said, then paused and peered into the Jeep. "Though, unless you have a truck or something following behind, it looks like I thought wrong." Kat only had a few bags, and I wondered why. People tended to collect stuff as they lived. A vase with memories filling in the crack along the rim, a picture of friends or family, a book with wrinkles along the spine. What happened in Kat's life that she didn't seem to have many, if any, of those kinds of mementos? "You're more than welcome to help," she said as she reached into the back seat to produce 2 giant suitcases. "Who am I to turn down a case of good old-fashioned chivalry when I find one?" She hefted a bag my way and then hopped out of the Jeep, maneuvering the other out behind her. "Let me just take a minute to put the top up in case it rains." I propped her luggage on the ground and helped her with the soft top. "You ever take the doors off?" I asked. The growlers I'd driven overseas were a lot like Jeeps without doors. Getting used to the ground zooming past without anything keeping you safely tucked inside took time. I doubted this little woman was brave enough. She looked at me like she knew what I was thinking and was all too happy to prove me wrong. "All the time. I didn't today since I kinda needed them with me, now that this place counts as a home for a while, you know? It made more sense to transport as actual doors than to try to find room in the back." "You make a good point." I finished zipping up the soft top. "Usually." She peered around the hood with a look that begged me to say anything different. I led her toward the house, explaining the intricacies of food and meals. As an employee living in the hut, she'd have full access to the kitchen, though so did anyone else currently living here, myself included. It can be a little complicated at first, learning to work around everyone's needs, but we'll find a rhythm. She stepped onto the porch and paused, turning her face to mine. There was a moment of silent eye contact. I could feel myself glaring down at her, doing that thing where I get all intense and glowery, but I had no choice. Not with the flood of all things Kat Wallace zinging through my body. Her skin, her smile, the light in her hair, her perfume. With Katie Did's name chasing along behind, trailing a ribbon of guilt. Kat blushed, and then smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing about her. "How many people live here now?" I held open the door and gestured for her to enter. Right now? That's a good question. I started ticking off names in my head, but the number got tangled in my thoughts. Before I could answer, Wyatt came around the corner with Eli. "What's a good question?" he asked, before his gaze fell on Kat. "Hey, look who's here!" He greeted her like an old friend and introduced her to our brother, who lifted a hand and said, "Hey." Eli's eyes traveled across Kat's face, down to her shoulders peeking out of her tank top, and right along her perfect breasts. He drank her in, savoring her the way she was built to be savored. And I didn't like it. Not one bit. "Kat wanted to know how many people live here now," I said to Wyatt while giving Eli a look that meant, "Back off." Wyatt furrowed his brow. "Well, let's see. There's you, Eli, Caleb, and Harlow," he said, holding up fingers as he spoke. "And Mom, of course." He added another finger. "Then there's Jimmy and Taylor and Emma." He finished lifting fingers and waggled them my way.
"And now me," said Kat. "So that's 9.
She pursed her lips and bobbed her head.
"That's a full house. Thank goodness the rooms each have private bathrooms."
"That's nothing." Eli raked a hand through his hair, his gaze darting my way, as if to remind me he didn't need my permission to talk to Kat. "Imagine what it was like when we were kids, back before all the renovations and we only had 1 bathroom per floor." The 5 of us kids each took to our lifestyle in our own unique way. Dealing with the commotion of living in a bed and breakfast came naturally to Wyatt. He adapted to all the hubbub as if he was born for it. Younger me resented the constant change as guests came and went. No matter how much I learned about a person, no matter how much I grew to like them, they were temporary. Here for a week and then gone. Eli learned how to talk to anyone about anything. Caleb got mad, and Harlow took turns either basking in the spotlight or running from it. Kat laughed, the glimmer in her eyes lighting up the entire room.
"I can't. It must have been a madhouse."
Wyatt shrugged. "There was never a dull day, but I'll be honest, I kind of miss it. Now that we're more hotel than B&B, you lose that personal connection with the guests." "You say that like it's a bad thing," I said, then moved toward the stairs. "I'm gonna show Kat where to put her stuff." I grimaced at the pain in my leg as I guided her up the steps into her room, located conveniently next to mine, then presented her with 2 keys, one for the main house and one for the room itself.
"Well," she said, reaching for her suitcase, "guess it's time for me to get settled in."
"Guess so." My fingers brushed hers when I handed over her bag. Her skin was smooth and cool, and all I wanted was more. But my phone weighed heavy in my pocket, a constant reminder of a woman who wasn't mine. Neither of us moved. After a second, a smile tugged at the corner of her lips, and she dropped her eyes to the ground.
"Thanks for the help."
"Anytime." Another long pause. She laughed nervously and slid her key into the lock.
"See you around, Lucas,"
she said, and with that, she stepped inside and closed the door. I stared after her for a beat, then went into my room, pulled out my laptop, and drafted a reply to Katie Did.